put me in the mood. Doesn't take much these days. Hi, Mike.
How are you?
I am wonderful, and I'm so happy to meet you. This is Game Changers with me, Vicki Abelson, and my guest today is piano man Mike Garson, who I have seen on stage dating back 44 years, I want to say. Is that right? Anyway, it's a ridiculous amount. No, 47 years ago, a crazy amount of time ago, Mike, you were a baby. And I want to talk about that because I've done a lot of reading about you, a lot of listening to you. I know you grew up in Brooklyn, but how did this whole piano, did you play out of the womb? I mean, were you a child prodigy? You had to be. You play like crazy. Where did this start for you?
You know, in most houses in Brooklyn, there was a piano, you know, and my mom played, my dad played, and my sister played. So it was sort of built-in peer pressure. And I started lessons at 7, which seemed young, but I've seen a lot of talented people who started at 3, 4, and 5, and you even have an edge when you're able to start that young. I've started one of my grandsons on drums at 2. So the earlier the better, because it's something about the absorption and the cellular memory and just being part of it. But 7 was good, and by the time I was, 9 or 10, I was getting pretty good. By 12, I started doing concerts, and 14 started working professionally. In fact, in the Catskill Mountains, upstate New York, where you really get the ultimate training, because every night there's a different singer. So I must have played over a 6 or 7 year period for 800 singers, from the worst to the best. Mel Torme being at the top, and Gregory Hines with his family. They danced and sang. And
Steve Lawrence and Eddie Gourmet, did you play with them up there?
They were at the Concord when I was at Raleigh, so I didn't play with them, but I know them, of course. And yeah,
how did you do that, Mike, at 14? How were you able to get a gig like that at 14?
In the place where the Rose Bowl, in the Roseland, New York City,
right,
where the musicians union used to be able to congregate at Roseland in Manhattan every Wednesday at 2 to 5, and there'd be thousands of musicians in there and people on a microphone saying, piano player needed for this bar mitzvah, someone needed for the Catskills for this weekend, and they'd sell sheet music of the newest song that came out. This is in, 61, 60, 62, and I'd go there and I got work, and they'd say, we need a quartet to play in the summer in the Catskills for $40 a week, and I would take it.
And these band leaders would hire you, even though you were just this little pisher kid because they based it on what you could play, obviously.
One of the band leaders, it must have been 60 or 70 at the time, and he played the accordion, and I was 14, 15, and we had saxophone and we had drums and bass. In fact, the sax player is still a close friend of mine. His name is Dave Liebman. He played with Miles Davis. When I went off with David Bowie in 72, he went off with Miles Davis, and we went to the same high school, but we got the same kind of training, because you're reading music every night, you're playing for a dance team, you're playing for a singer. So you get a lot of experience that way. Plus I had private lessons from the best teachers in the world. In New York on the jazz scene in the 60s, I got to study with Herbie Hancock, Bill Evans, Lenny Tristano, Chick Corea. I mean, that lucky.
How did you get to study with Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea? How can that possibly happen? They're teaching?
Herbie came to see me playing in the Catskills. He was friends with the drummer who was lived in his building, who was Bob Moses, another jazz drummer. And I went up to him. I said, could I get a couple of lessons? He said, sure. So I went up to his house on Riverside Drive. Bill Evans was playing in the Village Vanguard. I went up to him. I said, can I have a lesson, Bill? I'm very serious about music. He gave me a 6-hour free lesson. I studied with a blind pianist named Lenny Tristano for 3 years. He played with Charlie Parker, a very good teacher. And another guy who did arrangements for Thelonious Monk named Hal Overton. So, and earlier than that, I had a Juilliard teacher who lived next door to my house in Brooklyn. So I didn't even have to go to Juilliard. I just walked 30 yards over to his house.
And how did you, up there, my father sang all those jazz standards. How, as a 14-year-old kid, did you know all those? So is that how improvisation came into your music? Because you couldn't possibly have known all those songs you were playing. Or were you a great reader at the beginning? How did you do it?
Both. I was a very good reader, and I would memorize another standard every day. So at that part of my life, by the time I was 16 or 17, I knew about 1,000 standards.
Wow.
And now I maybe remember 50 or 100 of them, but I knew them then. And then if I didn't know them, I would read them, because I was a very good reader, because I played classical music. So reading a sheet music for pop stuff was nothing,
Right.
If you learn how to read chords when you're young, and you understand how to play them on the piano and voice them and spread them out and all that, that's one of the keys into improvisation. And improvisation was fascinating to me, but it reminded me of life and how things unfold spontaneously. But I made a study of it because it sounds sometimes random to people, but it's actually quite controlled if you've done your homework. I probably, a lot of people don't know this, but I think I've played the piano over 150,000 hours. So
wow.
They say it takes 10,000 hours to make a master in a subject, So think about that, that's all I've done since I'm 14. A lot of people had to, for survival purposes, do day gigs, do this, do that. I've been blessed that it's always been music. There for sure were times when I wasn't working, because the graph of a musician is up and down, and you might be employed one day and the next day you're not self-employed, you're unemployed. So there was a time after I toured with David the first time from 72 to 74, I had no work, 75 and 76. And then people thought I was still with him, so nobody was calling me.
Wow.
You're virtually starting all over.
So you didn't have to do any day job. Did you have day jobs then when you were in that period? You didn't have to do day jobs.
I started teaching piano when I was 17 or 16. So I also have taught piano over 10,000 students my whole life. I still teach. I love teaching. And so I was a natural at teaching. With piano, I was natural, but even more natural as a teacher. And it came to me naturally, whereas the piano playing, I practiced my head off many days, 4, 6, 8 hours a day. And I still do, I still practice.
Well, that shows. So you're saying that improvisation is something that can be learned? The basis of improvisation?
You can learn it. You may or may not be great at it. There's first you have the natural gift, which is, I don't know, God-given or whatever you're endowed with, and some people have, let's say, that it factor, and Bowie has it, and Dylan, John Lennon, Oscar Peterson, Art Tatum, Bill Evans, Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea, McCoy Tyner, John Coltrane, Miles Davis. Certain people have it, and then the hard work starts. So you can learn quite a bit about improvisation, and you can learn quite a bit about rhythm, harmony, and melody are the elements of music. So you learn all three of those aspects, and you learn how to put them together by learning scales and chords. You can start to learn how to improvise. I have students in the first lesson where I show them just a C scale, and I have them improvising the first week, because I have figured out how to break it down. Whether, as I said a minute ago, whether they turn out great, that depends on part one, what their natural endowment is. But anyone could be taught it, and depending on how many hours you're willing to put into it. It's not natural if you're a classical pianist like I was to improvise. But when I heard Dave Brubeck and Andre Previn and Coltrane, I thought, that's fascinating. I want to learn how to do that. So I would ask a lot of musicians when I was 14 or 15, and they said, if you don't feel it, you're out of luck. That made sense 50 years later because I feel it now. Then it didn't make sense. And I knew these people were not being honest. So I found teachers that were willing to break the code and teach me, because it's like a code. And that's why it's mysterious to people. And there's so many levels of improvisation, and it can be broken down and taught, but somebody has to really be willing to. It's not something that you do superficially. You know, I can show superficially how the idea of it, but if one wants to really dig in deep, I'm still figuring it out.
But and you're such a master at it that you were able to do that on stage with Bowie. He trusted you enough that, from what I have heard you say, you could do it differently every night, and he was okay with that.
David was the most unusual singer of the 800 or 900 singers, 1,000 I've played for, by far, in that he gave me a lot of space. It wasn't I'm his accompanist and he's the singer. We co-created together. We were a duet, and I could feel in my fingers him, and I could feel his pulse and his beat and his heart. And I was the loose cannon in the band, in that everyone else played their parts, a little improv, a little this, a little that, but essentially they're playing the meat and potatoes of the song.
Right.
And because the infrastructure was there of the bass and the drums and the guitar from Mick Ronson and Woody and Trevor and the Spiders in those days, that infrastructure allowed me to be free. And I played with 10 or 12 different bands with David over, let's say, over the 40-year span, on and off. So every band I played with, he gave me that freedom to be who I wanted to be. And he only asked that I brought him in at the beginning of the song, so he got into the key right, and I ended the song relatively like the records. But for the most part, he really let me be, which most singers will not let you do. They micromanage and they want to control you. He gave freedom, which is why I lasted more than the first 8 weeks that I was only originally hired for.
So tell that story. How did you come to get the gig?
I was given a piano lesson in Brooklyn, 1972. My daughter at the time was 1. My wife was working. And the phone rings, and it was Bowie's manager, actually. And they said,
how did he come to call you?
David had run into Annette Peacock. Annette Peacock was an avant-garde singer on the New York scene, and David knew of her. Coincidentally, I had played on her record a few months earlier, because I was playing kind of wacko avant-garde music, and she was really out there, but very creative. So David, when he came to New York, don't know why he didn't bring a piano player, because if you're doing songs like Changes and Life on Mars, you need piano. So he didn't bring a pianist, and he asked her. She recommended me. The manager called me, and I said, well, I'm giving a piano lesson. So, well, if you could be here in 20 minutes, you have a chance to audition for David Bowie. So I don't know who David Bowie is. And you could feel David in the background hearing this, thinking, this is good. I want this guy. So I left my daughter with my piano student. It was his first lesson. My wife wanted to kill me when she came home. I'm not there. And there's this, my daughter is sort of swinging in a swing next to the piano. And this little guy is watching her, who I had just met, who could have kidnapped her.
Oh my God.
And my wife still brings it up to this day, you know. How could you do that? Anyway, I played 8 bars of Changes for Mick Ronson. I played and then I was on, and that was it. He said, you got the gig.
Okay,
I said,
What?
Nick, I didn't start playing. He said, I play the piano. I know you can do it.
Wow.
That was the audition.
Your 8 bars of changes was your audition.
What I just played now was longer. I never even got to the rhythm part.
Wow. Wow. I was saying before we went on the air that I always said that I wanted the flute haircut, and it is actually the Mick Ronson haircut. Jane Fonda definitely got it from him. You played a lot with Mick Ronson as well. Well, we'll get to that. So when I saw you guys 74, it was the Diamond Dogs tour. We'll talk about let's talk about that, because it was very different for David, because he did come out in a trench coat and a top hat and a hat, and he didn't have the orange hair. He looked very different. There were catwalks. There was a cherry picker. He came out and did Space Oddity. It was wild. How did it go from, that was not your first tour with him though. You did Ziggy Stardust, right?
Right.
Okay. So was that I assume that was your first rock tour?
The Ziggy one was my first big one. I had played with a rock band called Brethren a few years earlier. We used to open for Joe Cocker, and I took over Dr. John's job, but the band never quite made it. The drummer was great, Rick Murata, became famous. But this was the big time with David, and the Diamond Dogs tour was by far the most expensive tour probably anyone had done up to date. And that thing with the cherry picker up,
It was crazy.
And he's in this little space that got stuck in a few cities where he literally was panicked, and he had to get out of it and walk across sort of parts of the balcony very nervously.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know about that. And that David told me one of his only regrets, he was very efficient about filming every tour and videoing and recording everything. That one didn't get done that way. Maybe somebody has it somewhere.
Wow.
And that was the most impressive. It was a Broadway show.
It was.
Rock elements. In fact, the band, Michael Kamen was the musical director at the time. I was playing piano, he was playing synthesizers. The band was unhappy because we were placed underneath the stage like a pit band on a Broadway show, and that didn't feel like a rock band to us. But David had a different vision.
Right.
As you said, what happened is we did this tour from the East Coast to the West Coast, literally ran out of money. So we came back with a whole different group on the Young Americans tour, where I opened the show called the Garson Band, and Luther Vandross was singing, and Dave Sanborn was playing Carlos Alomar, and we switched drummers and bass players. Dennis Davis played drums, and it became this funk band. And we came back from California back to New York. So we went one direction with an English rock band with Tony Newman and Herbie Flowers on drums and bass. And we came back with Carlos and on Dennis Davis was a fantastic drummer, and Amir Kassan was the bass player, Dave Sanborn. But Dave was with us. Some were with us on both parts of the tour. But
so how did it then get billed for the second part of that tour? David Bowie with the Mike Garson Band. How did that happen?
It was actually David Bowie and the Garson Band. So we opened the show for him. Again, he gave me ultimate freedom. I played jazz songs. I played Latin music. We did soul music. Some of the audience was really pissed off because they're waiting for David, and I'm playing this bizarre music. We were playing at the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and on that tour, we had a white rug on the stage. It was white rug, the whole stage, beautiful furry rug. And I see flying through the air an egg, and it lands on and breaks. The yolk comes out, the yellow comes out right between me and Luther, because like, get the fuck off the stage, we want David, so it wasn't easy, but leave it to David. He had a vision. Unfortunately, it was never recorded properly, so there's only some cassettes of the Garson Band that you could barely make it out. But
wow.
We led into his show, and he came out, and of course it was a phenomenal show, you know.
What a show. And from what I recall, when he started singing Space Oddity, we didn't even know where he was because he wasn't on the stage.
Right.
And all of a sudden we're hearing him sing and he's above our head. I mean, that was incredible. That had never been done before. That was amazing.
I mean, they're talking Renaissance man and not your typical rock musician. There aren't too many interviews you're going to do or singers that I'm going to play with who were David Bowie. You know, this guy, we will know of him in 500 years and we'll know of him in 5,000 years. I mean, he's
Absolutely
not fly by night because he was much more than a rock musician, you know. So that's all I know. I mean, right now.
So you were with him for so many years. Personally, because he seems so ethereal, eccentric. What was your relationship like personally?
He was down to earth, just like us talking now. There was no difference. He had a great sense of humor. He was extremely well read, so sometimes we couldn't follow him. He'd talk about painters and artists. I don't know what he was talking about. Reading philosophy books. I mean, he was a sponge. So he really understood life and people, and it all ended up in his songs and in his lyrics and his performance. I wished I could have appreciated it a little more at the time. When you're somebody's pianist, you're there to support. So I'm just thinking about playing the right notes and happy to get through the gig and supportive. It's nerve-wracking when you look out there and there's 100,000 people. But so I couldn't appreciate like you could or a fan in the audience. However, on the Ziggy Stardust tour, the first American tour, I didn't play every song. So there were certain songs like Width of a Circle and Hang On to Yourself, where just the Spiders were playing. I would sneak out into the audience because those weren't even sold out shows. And
wow.
I'd sit in the first row and watch him. And I thought to myself, this guy is amazing. But I actually go watch the show for 2 or 3 songs and run backstage. I mean, David never knew that, but that's what I was watching the show.
Wow. What was when you were growing up, did the Beatles have an impact on you the way they did to most of us, or no?
I don't think I knew of them until they broke up. I mean, I was practicing the piano.
Wow. So so you weren't listening to music at all, other than you were playing music. You weren't listening?
I'm listening to classical and a little jazz.
And so
to this day, I don't know much about rock and roll. David said the ultimate statement in the newspapers in London in '73. The top of the page said, Mike Garson is the best rock pianist in the world because he doesn't play rock. There you have it.
That's hysterical. Do you like rock music? Do you like to listen to it now?
I don't usually listen to it, but some things I like. Some things I like very much. So yeah.
I mean, because you've played with the 9 Inch Nails and Smashing Pumpkins. I mean, you've played.
I still don't understand. Don't understand. I don't know why those guys want me or like me. I just played on a Duran Duran new album, a Def Leppard album. I just played on a track for Trent Reznor that he produced for Halsey. I don't get it. You know what I mean? I spend my whole life composing, writing classical music, playing jazz, and the rockers keep calling me.
So does jazz speak more to your heart? Do those speak more to your heart?
Mm-hmm.
They do. Can you play us something that speaks to your heart off the top of your head? Anything that moves you right now?
I could write something in the moment because what I am is an improvising pianist. That's what I've been doing for 60 years. So I just play how I feel in the moment based on the audience and the people there in the space. So I could try to do something like that.
I would love that.
I don't play classical pieces by Chopin or Mozart or Bach. Right. I just play how I feel in any given moment. Otherwise, I'm sort of not the right person for the gig. So I can do that. Like,
you're the right person for this gig because I love that. And whatever moves you, I'm excited to hear.
I don't know any more than you till it comes out, right?
Okay. Thank you. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. I have been listening to you all day and I've been so moved. Your variations on Bowie, was that all improvised?
It was all improvised, so I don't know those pieces because I only played them once,
Wow.
just like I did now. It just so happens this one I made up from scratch. In those cases, I took a Bowie song and improvised on them. I'll do that.
Before we go, I want you to do.
Last thing I do, I'll play Space Oddity in
Oh.
a new variation.
Oh.
I don't know the old variation, but so I'll play a new version for you.
I would love that. Okay, so I also saw the Glass Spider tour, which was another like huge extravaganza with choreography and all kinds of craziness. And how was it for you to grow with David?
You know, initially he was being another character as he sang in the Ziggy period, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aladdin saying Thin White Dude. But when I rejoined him in the 90s till the end of the last tour, and did his last tour with him, which ended in 2004, we were out on the road for 13 months. He was just coming out as a normal guy singing his music, both new stuff and old stuff. And he didn't have to hide behind a character. He hid behind those characters early on because he was scared and nervous. And he was brilliant as an artist that worked. But now he's married to Mon and has a daughter and all this kind of stuff. It was much more simple and relaxed, and his voice was lower because he was older, but it was actually richer. So I very much enjoyed playing with him in the 90s and the 2000s. It's just that people only know him for the most part from the Ziggy period because that's the biggest impact,
right?
Because of the zeitgeist of the time. But people will be discovering many phases of his music as the years go on.
Absolutely. I heard today that when Aladdin, that when you were doing Aladdin Sane, he was encouraging you to try to think outside the box. Is that so?
Very much so, because I knew they were a rock band. I never thought of using my classical techniques, my jazz techniques, my avant-garde techniques. It was the last thing I thought of. So when the band was playing, I just played simple blues things. And he said, no, that's too commonplace. And as I tell the story, I then played a Latin solo because I had played with Latin bands in the Catskills Mountains. I played opposite Eddie Palmieri and Larry Harlow, people that were great Latin musicians. And in Latin music, they sort of play things like. So I did one of those things that makes one there. And he said, that's great, but Didn't you, he said to me, these were his exact words, didn't you tell me you played on the avant-garde scene in New York, that you played crazy jazz and improvised and free music? I said, yeah, but that's why I'm not working Saturday night. So he said, these were his exact words. He said, leave that to me. So I played a one-take Aladdin Sane with all that crazy stuff that people know to this day. And I never heard it, I don't think, for 15 years. It was just, to me, it was a session.
Wow. Wow. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And so in between this, your time with David, you're doing this, you've composed for film, for television. Okay, now wait, you've done music for therapeutic purposes as well. Is this true?
I wrote a healing suite. I worked with a brain surgeon. I wrote something.
Now, how did this happen?
Something I've been working on for about 25 years. What people don't fully understand is when you go out with someone like David Bowie or U2 or Smashing Pumpkins in my case or something like that, what happens is you might be out for 3 months or 4 months, but then you're not working for 6 more months. So then you have to do other projects.
Right.
Artists, sometimes they go out for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, or we can have a long tour for a year, but then you might not be with that band for 3 more years. So in all that time, I do all these other projects. One of the craziest projects I did was the Liberace TV movie in 1988 or something, the first movie on ABC in Liberace's life. So I spent a lot of time learning his music. So I did that, Then
wow.
Then I did the movie Stigmata with Billy Corgan that came out with Patricia Arquette. And, so, and then I played jazz with Freddie Hubbard and this one and that one. So I've had a very eclectic life. And then I would tour around the world where I was doing master classes, teaching music, but I'd always play for the students because I like to do both. I like to explain things, and then I like to show. Some people learn by listening and hearing, and they feel the emotion, and they don't want to hear words, and other people don't get all the music, but when you explain it. So this way I cover both bases.
Wow. And so how did this healing, this music healing come about? Did that personally touch you somehow? Did you have
I was a pre-med student in college. I didn't know I was going to do music. So I always, let's put it this way, music always healed me, but we didn't use that word 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It was like, music, it's a night out, it's entertainment, it's a distraction, maybe it calms you down, but we never said music heals. But the truth of the matter is, whatever music you love, so it could be a punk band, or it could be Mozart, or it could be Oscar Peterson or Bill Evans, or it could be Bowie, whatever it is that you resonate with and love, on a certain level, emotionally or spiritually, it's healing you. And why do you think that everybody's walking around with their little AirPods and, everybody loves music. It's one of the only things that you could almost escape politics and
absolutely
crap, and people just love music, but it has to be the music that they love. And then if there's a dispute, I like this band and that's healthy and it's fun. But I realized the healing power of music, but I started to put specific intention on it. And I wrote 30 pieces and we surveyed it on 100 patients. So they chose their favorite 12 pieces that was going to be the healing suite that I was going to orchestrate. It was a full orchestra, a children's choir, a jazz band, a singer. And we had a debut of it about 8 years ago, and it was beautiful. And then I wrote some music for children with autism. My grandson has autism, so I was interested in that. And so what happens to me is I get bored if I do too much jazz, too much rock, too much classical. So I'm always looking for something interesting. If I teach too much, I get bored. If I'm doing the healing music too long, but I was able to put in 2 years to that of time, and that was very rewarding, you know. So I've
So
done.
tell me, Mike, how do you know this is healing? What constitutes healing music when you're writing, when you're composing it?
The senior thing is you have to have that intention. So if you have the intention when you're writing a piece to show you're rebellious, that will come across. If you have the intention when you're writing a piece of music to calm the audience, if you have the intention when you're playing a piece of music or writing it to dazzle them with virtuosity, that happens. If you have the intention to heal, there's 3 ways you can heal: physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Physically, it's you, if you're healing, if the music is healing you physically, you're lucky, you know, and it's a freak, and that's not what normally happens. But it's calming for someone who's physically sick. I just finished an album for cancer patients of all healing music with some songs and a few Bowie songs. It wasn't only what you think of as healing music. It was music that I think people would enjoy. But mentally and emotionally, it certainly helps. And the most important thing is spiritually. And also when a person is dying and moving on, it's nice to listen to music that way. I was talking to a singer who her grandmother only spoke Spanish, and she loved the David Bowie song where I played the piano called Lady Grinning Soul. You know that one? That one. So the grandmother asked her granddaughter, who's a singer, can you play Lady Grinning Soul on a loop all day long till I die? And that's what happened.
Wow. My father was in a coma before and I know you're going to do some music, I believe, for Alzheimer's. Is that something you're working on?
The Alzheimer's music, I can't write music for it because those patients, what they like are songs from their childhood.
Yes.
So they know already. So I've been around those people, and if you play like a Gershwin song, if they were born in the 20s or 30s or 40s, they're happy with that. Or so I've known people now that are different age, so a Beatles song from them from the 60s,
right,
bring it for them, you know, or whatever. So I can't find a way in to write an Alzheimer's piece of music. But I could, if I'm around those people, I'll ask them what they like. And if I know the song, I'll play something from the old days. But autism, yes. I wrote a tango for a lady who had Parkinson's, and she danced it on stage with her husband. The house, everyone was just hysterical crying. It was one of those.
Oh my God.
You know,
that's so true. That's so true about the Alzheimer's. My father was in a coma, and yet I was playing all those standards that he sang in the Catskills, and he was tapping his foot and moving his hands and very aware of the music.
There you have.
Yeah,
So,
very aware of the music.
So I'm just, let's say, codifying or tapping into something that everyone intuitively knows. And then I spend a lot of time. And of course, we asked the patients which ones they like. Some of the patients said that piece makes me anxious. So I took it out of my piece.
So, okay, Mike, we don't have a lot of time. We only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you about a Bowie celebration. What inspired you to start that? I saw it a couple of years ago before the pandemic. It was so thrilling. And you guys are not playing, it's not like what did they call it, a tribute, because you guys were the band. So what inspired you to start that up and keep that moving?
You know, I had no plans on doing that because when David was alive, I must have been asked to do 30 tribute bands. And why would I do a tribute band if I'm playing with the real guy, right?
Right.
When he passed, there was someone who put a band together and they asked me to play with them, but that person hadn't worked with Bowie. And the alumni musicians were sort of resentful, so they wanted me to take over. So it just sort of fell into my lap, and I took over, and I toured it for about 4 years up into COVID. And then the last 2 years I've streamed it with many great artists from Billy Corgan to Trent Reznor to Andrew Day, on and on.
Jules Galley did my show not that long ago. I know Jules just did one of your latest shows, right?
He sang in Pasadena, I think, before the COVID, you know. So it's one of those things where it fell into my lap in the same way the Bowie gig fell into my lap. I mean, if I don't know the guy and I ended up with him all those years, it turns out I played the most shows of anyone, over 600. And they keep releasing albums. So now I'm up to 25, 30 albums.
Unbelievable.
But you got to understand, I was only asked to do 8 weeks in 1972.
So, okay, so how did that first extension happen? You were only given 8 weeks, then what happened?
David said, you want to continue?
Mm-hmm. And so that kept being the thing? He kept saying...
Well, what happened is I made a decision at that point in time. I'd like to do 2 years with him. That seemed like a long time as someone in my 20s, you know. And I played with him to 2 years to the date. And then I didn't see him for 18 years. And then I rejoined for Black Tie, White Noise. And then I did all those albums after Boot of Suburbia, Outside, Reality, you know, on, and Earthling. So I realized how much I missed being with him. But it took all those years. And for me to recognize it was my decision, who only wanted to be there 2 years. But I forgot, you know, you make decisions and then you forget you make the decision. Wasn't he calling me? Well, I'm going to shut it down, you know, because at that time, from 8 weeks to 2 years seemed like a lot. And I did 5 albums in that period of time: Young Americans, Pinups, Diamond Dogs, Aladdin Sane, you know, a few other ones, Live, the Ziggy movie, and all that stuff, you know.
All right, I have so many more questions, but I'm looking at the time. I know I have a hard end with you that I've got to honor, but I want, please play a little of the Space Oddity that you mentioned you would play from Variations of Bowie before you go.
Yeah, I do a new version, a new variation.
Yeah, new variation, even better. You move me. Thank you so much, Mike, for doing this, for doing that. That was beautiful. You brought a tear. I miss him. and he lives on through you and the work that you're doing.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you for having me. Nice to share. You know so much about him, so it's very easy to talk to you about it because we share that love for him as an artist. You know.
Absolutely. And you are a magnificent artist. And I look forward to more you. And hopefully you'll come back and talk some more when you have some more time. And thanks so much for doing this, Mike. It was lovely to meet you after all these years in your presence 47 years ago. Crazy, crazy.
It's frightening that you were at that show. You must have been 1 year old. Or you were 1 year old or something.
Yeah, exactly. I was 1 year old. Wonderful. Thanks so much, Mike.